So my name is Adam. I am the founder and managing director of Innovative Logistics Group. I'm from Alkaloo, South Carolina, which is a small town that's outside Manning, South Carolina. So I grew up around agriculture the entire time, and I was inspired to drive a truck. One thing I didn't realize at a very young age is that when you take that commitment as a truck driver, one thing that you'll see is that you're gonna visit home and you're gonna live on the road. And that is a very, very different lifestyle to live. Has anybody in here over the last week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, went to a truck stop and took a shower? Anybody? Took a shower at a truck stop? Nobody? So none of you took a shower at a truck stop in the last month. Really? I used to do it every day. And you know what the crazy thing about retention and recruiting is? And I was just listening to the last slide that the gentleman had on the slide, and he was kind of talking about the competition behind it. When you go to the bathroom at a Pilot or a Flying J or a Petro or a Pilot, you know what, as a driver, you see more than anything else? Anybody want to take a guess? Somebody said it. Jobs, right? So they have these huge job boards that when you go into these bathrooms and these showers, that's all you see. You see all these other companies offering the world to these drivers, so you got to imagine the importance of, one of the things that I think about when I think about recruiting, the most important thing is that you want to train your drivers to where they're going to stay, but you're going to create an atmosphere where they'll never leave. And that's the biggest challenge for us, is because there's a lot of recruiters in here that you provided some information from the carriers, and carriers not necessarily living up to their realm, so we're going to talk about that here in a little bit. That young man right there is not my son, that's not my brother, that's actually me. You see the date on that, 10/12/2000 is when I got that CDL. I was a Class A CDL holder with a hazmat endorsement. I could drive anything up and down the East Coast. I can drive a 10-speed, 13-speed, 9-speed, 18-speed. Some of the things that you guys are struggling with as recruiters right now is that they can't do none of that stuff. It makes it very, very hard and very, very difficult for you to do so. I did over 1 million miles behind the wheel. I started my own trucking company when I was 23 years old. I went through all the ups and downs. I enjoyed that because that was something that I was super passionate about. What I see, and unfortunately it's the way of the world, things have changed. The industry has changed in terms of the driver abilities and the driver dynamics. One thing that hasn't changed within the industry is some of the technology influences that we're lacking. So that's me. You get a chance to see with me in a nutshell. I just want to talk to you a little bit about why small carriers, number one, it's much more difficult. When I talk about small carriers, I'm not talking about your 100 fleets. I don't consider that small. 95% of the United States, when it comes to carriers, 95% of the trucks that move on the highways are owned and operated by small carriers that own less than 5 trucks. If you knew that, raise your hand. All right? Did you know that if Schneider, J.B. Hunt, Swift, Werner shut the doors today, did you know that the country can still move? Because we got enough trucks on the highway to be able to facilitate that. Because the small carriers dominate the industry. But yet, unfortunately, the small carriers don't necessarily use the same resources in order to be able to do so. So when I think about recruiting and retention, it kind of goes hand in hand, but the most important things, you want to break that down. Number one, equipment and each truck's features as a driver recruiter is very, very important. 2, perks and benefits. 3, pay and bonuses. 4 is your culture, which is one of the things I feel is so understated. And number 5 is home time. You know, I think about something, man. When I was driving back in 2000, which is, 23 years ago, home time was like 2 weeks out, 4 weeks out, 2 days home, 4 days home. That was the way of the world. That's the way it worked. Has it changed much? It hasn't, right? It hasn't. And one of the things that I can tell you about a millennial and a Gen Z, because I have both, they ain't built like we are. They ain't built for being out on the road for very long. They don't want to stay out on the road. They want to have all kind of nice stuff inside the trucks. They want to have all the amenities possible, but sometimes we can't deliver them the world. So those are the things that when you think about you think about the strugglings, and back then we didn't have the data to track the time by leads and all of the things that we had. We didn't have that data to track, so I imagine that was very, very different. I think the first thing you got to focus on is knowing your offerings. And a lot of times, as a small carrier, you're small carriers, and if you do recruit for small carriers, they're going to tell you, well, we can't afford that, well, we can't afford this, and we can't afford that. I think that's a lie. We just got to put that together, and we'll talk about that here in a minute. But those are the things that I look at as very, very important. Then the next thing is the variety of jobs, right? Because there's a difference when it comes down to jobs that it's difficult to place in certain positions. Like, I was a flatbed driver. I started off as a flatbed driver, open deck and heavy haul. That's what I did. But I'm gonna tell you right now, that's a hard hire to place as opposed to a dry van driver on an automated transmission. Very, very different dynamic, and we've got to make sure that you understand that. So when you're looking at presenting, your ad spend or your budget for that, you got to know that your high costs are going to be your team drivers, your owner operators, and your low costs is going to be company drivers with drive vans. So it's knowing the difference in what your variety and diversity is. So when I think about tactics to implement the onboarding process, and that's another thing, and I'm trying to get through here a little bit. But the onboarding process is one of the ones that's a challenge as well, because a lot of times when it comes to the onboarding orientation, quite frankly, your drivers just don't show up. You got a lot of times where you go out, you get them all excited, they're gonna come, and all of a sudden you get that plane. For some of the small carriers, you give them that plane ticket and then they don't show up to the airport. The one thing that we suggest is using onboarding, using email communication, making sure that you have a welcome packet, and using technology to have a welcome webinar. Those three things are just little small touches when it comes to changing with the times and changing with the dynamics of the hire. Those are things that we recommend. So again, I think the biggest thing too that I look at is you got to make sure that you know your competition. I bet you Burger King knows how many McDonald's are nearby. Pilot knows when a Fly J is opening. You need to know your competition as well, and you also got to know how your offer stacks up. Now, the thing that's crazy, and as we move down a little bit, with today's technology, it's easier than ever to know how your offer stacks up. It's called Claude AI, if anybody have ever heard of it. It's called Bard AI. ChatGPT, not so much, because it's only up to 2021, but those two technology platforms will allow you to compare that data. So you got to know your competition, you got to know how to differentiate offerings, because I'm going to tell you what, you put a JB Hunt truck, a Schneider truck, and my truck, all three lined up in the same game, they got the same engine, same cab, same amenities, same trailer. The difference is the offer behind the seat of the job. And the crazy thing about it is that when it comes to the offerings, a lot of times we don't come out as competitive. And when I say we, I'm representing a small carrier, and I'm thinking about the small carrier from that perspective. We don't come out as competitive. And the reason why we don't come out as competitive is because we don't know, we don't get out, and we don't try to compete with the marketplace. The most important thing that you have to consider, especially when it comes down to a small carrier, is that when you're considering your offering, you got to make sure you can afford it. So we had 100,000 carriers go into business over the last 2 years, and 96% of them went out of business. Y'all remember Dean saying that? 100,000 carriers, 96% went out. I want you to think about something. I just said 100,000 people started a business, 96% went out. That means 96,000 people went out of business. 96,000 people that invested 150, 200,000 of their own earnings into starting a business no longer can do it anymore. Only 4% of the people that's still in business. And he made another stat that was crazy to me. He said something about like $2, 2 cents. Did he say 2 cents? I think he said his profit was 2 cents. Net profit 2 cents. Imagine this. I give you $1 and I ask you for 98 cents of it back as an employee. Imagine that. Those folks are out there struggling. And it's painful because not only you're struggling to make $1, I got to live out on the road. I got to take a shower in a truck stop. So there's a lot of things that are going up against you, and now you're competing with, number one, your competition, your Schneiders, JB Hunts, and all that other stuff. You're competing with the outside dynamics, and you're competing with the generations, because this generation, I'm just going to be honest with you, they're just not built like we are. Right? They're a lot more tech savvy, but they just don't want to do the things that we used to do. The next thing I want to say is that you got to make sure is the offering, servicing the needs of your company. And when I think about the needs of your company, every company is different, right? So when I think about the difference in a company, I think about, hey, if I'm doing RGNs and heavy haul, my offering's got to be a lot different than if I'm pulling line haul doubles or something like that. You got to make sure that your offering stacks up to that. Now, I'm going to skip through that slide because I don't want Schneider to be in this one. Is there somebody in here from Schneider? Okay. All right. So number one, another good one is 401k. I don't want to bore with you with this stuff, but even as a small carrier, and I was just having a conversation at my breakout table, even as a small carrier, you go off a 401k. It don't want to cost you a couple of bucks. You just got to do your research and do your homework. But a lot of people think they can't offer those things, but those things are important. As an employee, you got to make sure you offer those. And then also being an employee, you want to have it. So making sure that you're offering things with a company match. It's not that expensive to do so. You got to have health care, right? People's going to get hurt. People going to get sick. You got to have dental plans. You got to do those things. You got to have vision. You got to have flexible spending accounts. You got to have hospitality indemnity. You got to do all of that stuff. You got to make sure that because you know why you got to make sure that you're doing this? Because your competition is doing so. And then also when I think about things like CDL Defender, accident insurance, critical injuries, all of these things are things that you got to make sure that if you're recruiting for a small carrier, that they offer in these things. One thing I love is that when you have supporters like Get Realm, and you got different vendors out here that are doing those things that your companies can actually offer, that'll make a much more appealing benefit package for you to offer your clients. And I know some small carriers, in order for them to offer something like a CDL Defender plan, I think it's like $20 a month per driver to do that. It's something that you, as far as a minimal expense, but it'll give you a maximum return on investment in doing that. And then you got the other ones like family legal, voluntary life, short-term disability. I'm throwing this all on the screen for a reason. The reason why I'm throwing it on the screen is because I represent the voice of a small carrier. Our database is about 22,000 carriers. 22,000. And I want you to understand something. Most of them don't offer any of this stuff. So when you think about 100,000 carriers that got into business, 96,000 of them that went out of business, out of the 96,000 that went out of business, highly likely that they didn't offer all of these things. And one of the things that I can tell you that from a small carrier perspective, you know what the biggest pain point is for the small carriers right now? They'll go out, they'll take a course and they'll buy a truck. I'm gonna tell you, you just go back to what I just said. They go take a course and buy a truck. Does that sound crazy? Does that sound crazy? Let me know if I'm crazy. I'm gonna go get a course, I'm gonna go buy a truck, and I'm gonna hope to hire somebody because they wanna sit in my truck, right? And now all of a sudden that pressure that they have because they spent $150,000 on a truck that was worth $43,000 a year ago or 2 years before that, now that pressure becomes somebody else's pressure. I want you to think about what I just said. And when you think about the massive amount of motor carriers that went into business over the last 2 years, buy a course, go on YouTube, follow a TikTok influencer. They say buy a truck now, buy a truck. I go buy a truck, and finding a driver is going to be the easiest part. They're going to, at that point, you've got employees who've never been employers. They don't know all the dynamics behind that. And now the attrition and turnover comes as a part of that. This is what one of the things that frustrate me as a business leader and as a change agent expert is what I call myself. A change agent expert. The reason why it is fancy, the reason why I call myself a change agent expert is because when I pulled my first load back in 2000, I went from Laurinburg, North Carolina, to Louisville, Kentucky. I was hauling a double deck with 240-inch Stokes glass, 47,000 pounds of glass. I pulled into a truck stop. I am just happy as I can get out. I was living my dream. When I was a little kid, and I'm gonna tell you a little backstory, I used to draw trucks instead of taking tests. That's how passionate I was. I pulled into this truck stop. I'm all happy, it's my first load, and I'm thinking everybody's gonna be all happy, it's a great industry to be in, and I pull up and I walk into that pilot down in Louisville, Kentucky, and I was like, what did I get myself into? All I saw was pain in people's faces. I saw frustration, I saw obesity, I saw people that weren't taking care of themselves. And you know what I thought, what it brought me back to is, I wanna do one thing before it's my time to clock out as a person on the face of the earth. And the one thing that I want to do is leave this industry in a better place than I found it. That is why I came up with that fancy nickname, because I want to do that. But in order to do that, I need to touch not the carriers with thousands of trucks. I'm sorry. You got thousands of trucks, I love you, but I need to touch the ones that don't. Because those are the ones that dominate the industry and need the most help. They are struggling. When you're going up and down the highway and you're in the right lane and you're doing the speed limit like all of you do, most of the time those trucks that are passing you are not FedEx, not UPS. Trucks that's passing you is Bobby's Trucking. Trucks that's passing you is Dean's Trucking. Those are the ones that move the economy. When you think about the spot market, Dean was just talking about spot, the contract market. Everybody, okay, it's okay, we're in a closed room here, so we're all family. Everybody knows the difference between contract and spot freight, right? Okay, that's cool. Everybody knows that contracted freight is the primary mover of freight in the entire country, right? Everybody knows that 85% of all freight that moves in the country is contracted freight, right? If 85% of the freight that moves across the country is contracted freight, why is 90% of the folks that get started in a business, or more, 96 so far, why are they operating primarily on the spot market? And the ones that primarily operate on the spot market are doing what right now? They're exiting the business. One of the reasons why is because they go take the course, they go on YouTube, they follow a TikTok influencer, and all of a sudden now they don't know what to do. They don't know how to do it the right way. So you got to make sure, and part of my mission is to make sure they know how to do it the right way. You know, one of the things that I thought was so crazy is like, you know, I was like, dang, I remember I was working a job for a retailer, and they had all kinds of perks, man. You know, all kinds of stuff. One of them they had was like discounts where I can go get a TV for $100 off or whatever. That was pretty cool. But then I realized with small carrier, they're not offering the same stuff. So if you go to like perksatworks.com, did you know if you sign up as an employee at perksatworks.com, it's 100% free. You can offer it to all of your employees, and you get hundreds of thousands discounts, hundreds of thousands of different discounts. You know, I looked at things like on-demand pay and how important on-demand pay is. Let me tell you, I want you to think in your mind for a second. When you go out on a road trip, you just pack the cars up and you're gonna fly out and you're gonna go out on a road trip. And you're gonna go on this road trip and you're just gonna take a 2-week road trip. Aren't you gonna need money? Probably. I hate to say it, but as a truck driver, because your margins are so low, you're making 2 cents a mile. Like Dean said, you're making 2 cents a mile. Sometimes, you know what? You're gonna run out of cash out there. And when I say run out of cash, you're gonna run out of cash. You're gonna go to McDonald's and you're gonna hope that you can swipe the card to get some food. On-demand pay is just as important because you're able to, hey, the work has already been completed. A lot of times they want to do those little things that have on-demand pay and have access to their pay. So I think that's really, really important. And then when I think about rider programs, those are very, very important to me. Right now, in this particular generation, this particular era, we love pets. Somebody in here has a dog, and I just saw it. But we love our pets. But then when you talk to the small carrier business owners, like, yeah, I don't want them in my truck. I'm like, why? Why not? Like, it's an asset. These are things that your drivers are seeing when they walk into their Petros and when they walk into their Flying J's. This is what they're seeing. If you ain't gonna do it, somebody else is gonna do it. And then I always tell our folks to invest in high quality equipment. One of the biggest frustrations for me as a driver, and you know, I saw that most when I was actually doing it on my own versus when I was with a mega carrier, because mega carriers do a really, really good job of having the most high-tech equipment. But a breakdown means no pay. I'm not getting paid to sit here. I'm not getting paid to do anything. I'm not getting paid to wait. So make sure that you invest in high quality equipment. Make sure that the trucks are spec'd out to the VIT. Make sure you get in the large sleepers. One of the things I was seeing with the whole YouTube University is you would see last year truck purchases, because the dealerships were getting flooded with so many people buying trucks that they was getting offered the bottom of the barrel. Some of those trucks were mid-roofs, and I'm gonna tell you something like this. I'm 6'1", mid-roofs do not work for me. And you gotta think about that when you're putting your driver in your truck. So you just gotta make sure that you have that. You also wanna make sure that you're recognizing military. And I saw on a previous gentleman was talking about the importance of military, recognizing service. Because one of the things that we recommend is we recommend that the carrier provides a differential for military service and making sure that carrier, or make sure that driver can get home when it's time to do services if there needs to be weekend duty done. So it's really important that you consider that. And then also, you know, from a financial and a legal standpoint, we kind of just mentioned on that. And I can tell you, your biggest recruiter, and if those that are working for a recruiting firm, the biggest recruiter for a small carrier is the driver, period. Me as a driver, I'm gonna talk to more drivers than you ever will. And the fact of the matter, I'm gonna talk to the drivers on the warm side, you're gonna talk on the cold side. I might be in the truck stop sitting there getting me something to eat, might be a driver right there sitting beside me, and I'm saying, hey, how you like it over there, Schneider? Well, I hate it. Let me tell you about what I think about over here, right? So I'm gonna talk to more drivers more than anything. And one of these strategies that we've taught some of our carriers is to make sure that you offer specific referral programs, right? So one of the things I like, and it's one of those tiered programs, is allow, especially if you pay on a percentage program, allow your drivers to get paid on every driver that they hire. So let's just say you pay 25%. And then I say, hey, listen, if you get me a driver for this empty truck, I'll pay you 1% on all his line haul, and I'll pay you 25% too. So not only are you making 1% for the lifetime that he's a driver, now you're gonna feel like you're part of that deal. Now what happens is I'm gonna make sure that while I'm talking to him, because I know I'm getting out extra 1% every month, I'm gonna make sure that he tries to stay as long as he can, because I wanna continue getting paid. You gotta offer these incentives, you gotta be creative. I mean, we can't do the same things that we did 20 years ago and expect to get the same results. It's harder now. You gotta incentivize, you gotta pay for it. And then paid time off is big. And as a small carrier, I'm gonna tell you what, that's one of the hardest things to negotiate because they're on such tight margins. They're on such tight budgets that they're so afraid that their truck sits. But if you don't, every other carrier will. So you have to make sure that you offer something competitive, and that's what's so important is your competitive offering. And then I think about the little small things that you can do, like loyalty programs and funeral leave, which obviously you want to make sure that you compensate. Making sure you have an adoption offering, whether or not your driver is going to use it. Make sure you offer these things and having a competitive offer. What I got on the screen now, and I think which is kind of not even funny, but your small carrier drivers and your mega carrier drivers, I'm going to give you a little comparison. And this is what I believe. So this is opinion. This is Adam's opinion. This is Adam's 23 and years and a couple of months opinion. Your smaller carrier drivers, which I mean smaller carriers, meaning that they're going to go drive for a non-mega, they typically go to the small carrier because they can get away with pay negotiation and non-governed equipment. It's one of the biggest reasons why carriers leave mega carriers to go to a small carrier. I remember that I said when I first became an owner-operator, you guys are going to think I'm crazy for what I'm about to tell you, but one of the main reasons why I went and bought my own truck at 23 years old is because I got tired of driving 63 miles an hour with Schneider. I was like, I cannot wait till I have to not do this anymore until I got my first fuel bill. And I could not wait to slow that damn truck down. These are reasons why you have that exodus happening. But then partially as well, it's crazy and it's insane to think that these drivers will go to the small carriers and negotiate pay. I was seeing pay last year, Lord have mercy. I was seeing $2,200, $2,300, $2,400 a week guaranteed on the spot market. Like, really? You're guaranteeing somebody $2,400 a week and it's not even on contracted freight. So I'm sitting here rolling the dice whether or not I'm gonna be able to gross enough that I can pay my driver. When I look at those stats with 96% of people going out of business, I know it sucks. But you gotta go back and look at yourself and you can say, you know what? Back in your mind, you're playing I told you so. Running your business the right way is super important. So when I look at the driving jobs, and I pull this up because I just wanted to show in comparison, the top 50% of Crete and Schaefer trucking drivers average $103,904 per year per driver. That breaks down to about 65 to 70 cents per mile. Well, obviously they're offering mileage pay enabler, I'm sure they quote very, very high miles on that one in order to be able to get to that number. But I'm gonna give you another interesting number, and I'm a numbers guy. 65 cents a mile on a truck that runs 95,000 miles a year, that, like I said, 95,000 miles loaded per year, 7,000 miles empty per year. If a driver's getting paid 25% of the gross line haul, that's 65 cents a mile, same thing, right? So, but when you go back to it and you look at it on the bottom line, that's only 100,000 miles a year. But not only is that only 100,000 miles a year, with that 65 cents a mile, if you do the math, that's only $65,000. So for them to state 103,000, that's $40,000 more dollars. So that's 40% more miles. And 40% more miles over 100, you do the math. That's wide open, and I'm not going home. And so these are the things that when they put these ads out, and you got to be very, very cautious in it. When you look at these ads, these are some of the things that you see. And then I look at, okay, y'all, let me just say something. I love Schneider to death. That was my first job. I love it. I think Schneider has one of the most comprehensive training programs. They got the most expansive networks. They got the coolest people that work there. But you got to know your competition too. So when I pulled up their information, I got one company saying that they can pay me $104,000, right? I got another company in the same exact region saying they're going to pay $79,000. Who do you think that I'm going to go drive for, right? But unfortunately, when you do the math, and these are one of the things where it's deceptive, when you do the math, That's a lot of miles in order for me to be able to turn 104,000 miles at 65 cents a mile. So these are what you're being pushed against. As a former driver, I'm gonna tell you this. The thing that was so compelling to me is when I see a trailer going out, I'll never forget it, and I don't know if anybody's an old head like me in here that remembers. There used to be a company called Mega Trucks. Anybody remember Mega Trucks? All right, I'm gonna tell you something. I got one. I'm gonna tell you something about Mega Trucks. Their trailers were wrapped. I mean, it was awesome. Their trailers were wrapped with how much they pay their drivers. And it was like $300,000 was the top pay at Mega Trucks. And so I can tell you, every time I saw a Mega Truck, I was writing down that telephone number ready to get on the phone and find out how I can leave this Schneider job that was paying me 23 cents a mile on a good week. I was making $600, $645 if I'm tarping, to go work for this Mega Trucks company that was paying $300,000 a year. Mega Trucks, they don't even exist no more. I'm sure it's got a little bit of something to do with that pay. But you got to look at all this stuff. And as a small carrier, you got to know your competition. And I know I'm talking to a lot of recruiters. I'm talking to a little bit of diverse audience, but I'm going to give you a general perspective. These are things that are out there. These are things that you're faced against, and these are things that you have to be considerate of. And my guy Bobby was talking about, the different segments and leads and things like that. So you got to remember is with that lead comes in, and this is a prime example. What he said was absolutely correct. Me as a driver, and I love trucking. Right? I love it. When I say I love it, I love it. But me as a driver, at least 2-3 times a week, I feel like a free agent in the NFL. I'm looking, okay, I'm getting paid here. Oh, what they paying? Oh, okay, what they paying? Oh, you like it? What they paying over there? I don't care how happy I was always looking for the next hire. And you know what the thing that was compelling about what Bobby said, he was like, that first 30 minutes, after that, it's like a 42%, and then it went up 48, I think something like that. 42% decrease in success. He ain't lying about that. Because I didn't filled out so many different applications that if you don't call me in that first 30 minutes, you who? Huh? Oh, no, I don't know who you are. But it's a battle. It's speed. Success loves speed. Success loves speed. The key to being a great recruiter is being a fast recruiter. And that brings me to, I hope the next slide is, no. Well, the thing about being a fast recruiter is you got to adapt to this digital age. And I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the things. Anybody ever heard of a bot? You heard of bots before? Have you ever? So it was a couple of weeks ago. I was trying to switch a flight. I had a situation. I was trying to switch flights, trying to change. Anyway, I called American Express. I'm on the phone with American Express, and who I thought it was a person at American Express, but I was talking to a robot. And you know how frustrating it is, but you know what they sell you? You can either wait for a live agent, which might be 2 hours and 96 minutes, or you can talk to the automated system, and we can assist you right now. While now I may not agree with doing everything automated and via tech, maybe some of that can help speed that first contact point, because that first contact point is the most important point. And then offering those drip breadcrumbs throughout and keeping that recruiter or recruitee engaged is super important. So I love the fact that we talked about integrating a little bit of technology into it, because integrating technology, that's where we're at, unfortunately. Artificial intelligence is here to stay, and it's going to stay for a long time. I was watching OpenAI. So they just filed another patent. The other patent is speech recognition. And no telling what's going to come out behind that. Apple is playing kind of quiet right now. Well, I don't know if we're going to be ready for Apple GPT, because we've been talking to Siri for a long time. I saw my man was up here talking to Siri. Siri was talking to him while he was trying to do an introduction. Siri knows everything about you. It knows how you text, who you text, how you wake up, when you fall asleep, when you take phone calls, when you don't. So imagine how that technology is going to kind of change things. So we have to understand. And one of the things I can tell you about the transportation and trucking industry is we're always behind. Did you know that your drivers are still signing in bill of ladings? Y'all know that? You know the drivers are still signing with a pen, like an ink pen. Like, like a Oh no, I need a pen. I like a pen, yeah, right, pen. You know that? Drivers still selling bill of ladings. We're in 2023. You're gonna order a Hublot on Amazon now and you won't have to sign for it, right? Did you know that in order for an owner-operator to get paid, he's got to submit a bill of lading? Okay, think about this for a second. I want to talk about technology. An owner-operator has to submit what's called a bill of lading. Everybody knows what a bill of lading is, I'm sure. But he has to submit all four corners of a bill of lading. You know what a bill of lading is? It's a proof of what? Delivery. I want you to think about that for a second. It's a proof of delivery. This big, you know what, 53-foot truck backs up to a dock, unloads 45,000 pounds of freight onto a dock, and we still need to see four corners of a bill of lading to prove that there's 45,000 pounds of stuff that's sitting right here. That's not crazy? It is to me. Because when I think about the industry that I got into 23 years ago, I was doing the same thing back then. So why is it so that we have not made that change? Our industry is not comfortable with change. We just started using ELDs, and something crazy that I found out, that the military was using GPSs back in the 70s. And we just started using ELDs like 10 years ago. It's because we struggle as an industry to adapt to technology. Now, unfortunately, there's a speed adaptation that's in there. Can't move too quick because you're going to leave people behind. We just got to be careful on that. And then when it comes to the money, you know, one of the things when it comes to the money, keep it simple. I hate these complex pay structures where they, you know, you go this, do this, plus this, plus this, plus that. But just pay it simple. Keep it simple. Make sure that you show that you're fighting for pay. You know, detention pay, even though if you don't get paid it, sometimes you got to make sure your driver gets paid. The driver don't want to sit either because he's not getting paid. So make sure you're doing that. And those bonuses, there's a lot of times that we try to be all funky with bonuses, but just keep it straight, keep it simple. And then most last but not least is important, don't run the trucks in the ground. Keep turning those things, keep those things, you know, average fleets are like 1.5 years, 2 years, and they turn into trucks. You got to turn trucks faster as a small carrier. And I know sometimes it's a money thing, you got to make sure that we're doing that. Now I can tell you, as far as the recruitment process goes for a small carrier, it's the same for a mega, same for a large carrier, right? You got to provide updates. And one of the things I love having is having something in my back pocket. So I'm not going to give you all the secrets at once. I'm not going to tell you everything about innovative logistics right now. I'm going to give you just enough so that when I call you, I can surprise you with something else. And then next time I call you, I can drop you with something else. And every time I call you, I'm dropping you with something that we call is like a breadcrumb. Like when you got pigeons on the ground, you just keep throwing it down and they keep following you behind you. That's what your leads will do if you do the same thing. Recruiting a small carrier driver is a lot different than recruiting a driver for a mega because you got to be a lot more creative. And then you got to make sure that you're checking in, right? You got to make sure you got it checking in. You're checking in with your drivers. You have an established schedule that you're going to call. You're going to check in on the lead that you reached out to, a driver that's supposed to submit your paperwork. You didn't get a CDL from a driver. You're going to make sure you set that in. Make sure that when there's not an update, that you always go through. Even if you don't have nothing to talk about, I'm just going to call you and say, hey, man, how you doing today? Doing good? You safe out there? Okay. Weather looks pretty good. I'm going to give you a call tomorrow. We're working on some things behind the scene. I got you your CDL. We're processing the background check. Just give me a couple hours. We should have it back. If we don't have it back then, I'll give you a call in the morning. That sound good? Okay, you safe now. All right. Make sure you have those touch points every single day, and that makes it a little bit easier for it. And then the crazy thing is orientation pay range. And when you talk about orientation pay, when it comes down to a small carrier, it usually doesn't exist because you know why orientation pay doesn't exist with a small carrier? Anybody want to know why orientation pay doesn't exist? No. Try to say that fast. Anybody? What's that? There is no orientation. You know what orientation is for a small carrier? Hey, Bob, you ready to start? Huh? Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll meet you at the airport. Okay, cool. We're gonna have orientation. All right, Bobby. There you go. Here's the keys. That's orientation. You know why? You know why it's like that? This is what it is. It's ignorance. You don't know. What you don't know, you don't know. I remember when I would go to my flatbed orientation that I did with Schneider, it was actually 2 weeks. because some of it was like, most of it was a week of securement and things, and we did glass haul and stuff like that. When I worked for Prime, it was 3 days. And the crazy thing is that I hear that one of the most challenges for a recruiter is getting them to fill out the application. Getting a driver to fill out a DOT-regulated application. So what Prime would do is we had to fill out a contact form as a driver. Name, address, telephone number, CDL, that's it. We send that in, go through an interview, hi, you're hired. When I get down there on day one of orientation, kind of was like, you have people going to the line and getting denied at the door. Well, at that point, what they would do is they would bring them in, and then they would run them through the process at that point, and they would have to fill out the applications on day one of orientation. So they cut down the speed and they cut down the folks that would not fill the application out by having them fill out the application on the day of the orientation. Now, as long as you don't give the driver the keys to that truck and that driver's not starting, technically the driver qualification file is still in order. So some things that you have to do to speed up that orientation process, but you got to make sure it's worth it too. I think our orientation pay back then was like $200, but at that point, $200 was like a third of my week's pay when I was working for that company at that time. This is one of my favorite benefits programs for small carriers, for small companies, called Perk Up. 100% free for you, 100% free for the small carriers. Crazy thing is you can offer them things like dinners, movies, restaurants, you name it, it's in there. It's called Perk Ups. You can set up anniversary stuff, celebration, gift rewards, the whole nine. And I love my popcorn people, folks back there in the back of the room, because I think that's such an amazing touch. You got to get really, really creative these days when it comes down to retention, because if you don't, your competition is. It's very, very difficult to compete in this era, because when you think about social media as well, social media has really, really changed folks. There's so much competition on social media. And when it comes to an employer, it's the same way. So you got to get out there and you got to make sure that you offer those things. These are some of the questions, and these are some of the things when you get into those interview processes. These are some of my favorite lines, and I don't call it a hook and sinker, but it is at least a hook. But these are the ones where sometimes you have to have that first line thought. I'm not sure this is for you, but let's talk a little bit further through it. Making sure that you're asking and you bringing in these very, very important phrases that are things that I look at as when it comes to that honesty piece, and that's where I want to get to. This is when you're setting expectations on both sides. And I think that's really, really important in here. Now, this is one of my favorite parts of it, and I was playing around with it. How many folks in here are very, very comfortable with OpenAI? Raise your hand. Raise your hand. Don't be afraid. I saw you. She's like, GPT, where my GPT folks at? Okay. Has anybody ever tried to write a driver ad through GPT? All right. Does everybody have ChatGPT? If you don't, one day it's going to be like, hey, you got a Facebook? Hey, do you got ChatGPT? Well, one of the things that I can tell you is that that ad right there on the screen right now that you're looking at, that ad took 2.5 seconds to generate, 2.5 seconds to generate. And that is a legitimate ad for one of our companies. And if you look at the context in it and you look at the copy, that's what it's called. It's called the copy. The body of it is called the copy. Now, the key to, and I'm just gonna, since not everybody has it, and if we had a little time, I would have, pulled it up and did a workshop with you on it. The key to OpenAI and when you're using artificial intelligence is what they call prompting. Artificial intelligence is not going to put people out of work. People that don't use artificial intelligence are gonna get put out of work. There's always gonna be opportunity within it. Using prompt writing is super important. And by using prompt writing within OpenAI and artificial intelligence, whether you use Bard, OpenAI, Chat, Claude, whatever, it is a benefit to you just because of the simple fact that it's able to pull sources at 500 million words a minute. You will never be able to scrub the internet that fast. So this ad, and I was going to show you the before and after, this ad required me to write 3 sentences to get that much content out of it. 3. And I encourage you to make sure that you use the power of ChatGPT, OpenAI, and those type of tools because it's a valuable recruiting tool. The next step and phase is that these recruiting tools that you see now that you're using today, as companies like CDLLife become much more complex, you'll see those integrations starting to happen organically as you continue to try to keep speed of the market, because it's all about speed. You got 30 minutes to engage with a driver. By the time you engage with that driver within 30 minutes, they don't engage with probably 4 other companies. So you got to make sure you stay with that speed. So, well, I didn't show you the second part of it. I said 2.5 seconds, it's actually still going. And when I say 2.5 seconds, it generated this entire ad. And look at some of the words that it's put in there. And I'm gonna tell you something, as a truck driver, I was real simple. You can catch me with some catchy words and some emojis. Mind-blowing. When you say mind-blowing pay, hey, let's talk. When you say mind-blowing pay, I wanna talk to you. But when you look at it, as an owner-operator and as a fleet owner, myself, these are tools that's gonna take me to the next level because it's gonna provide me one thing that I want more back than anything else, and that's time. Artificial intelligence is going to give you that time. It's going to give you that ability to go out and be able to market to your carriers and get to the speed. And then as you start developing bots, and your bots can send these ads out for you, and they can respond to the ads and say, hey, you need to call this person very quickly because you only have how many minutes? 30. You got 30 minutes. You got 30 minutes to be able to get Adam on the horn because Adam has been in a truck stop all day, and I got like 6 cards in my pocket because I just got out of the shower, and when I was leaving the shower, that's the first thing that I saw. Artificial intelligence is super important to use, and artificial intelligence is super important to use as a tool, especially if you're a small carrier that's trying to staff your trucks. When I say small carrier, remember, I'm talking about anywhere between 1 to 150 trucks. When you get over 150, then you're in the mid-size range. I appreciate you. My name is Adam. Have a great day.